Okay, I think we should get started. We've got getting close to over 40 participants now, so it seems like a good time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monica Driggers, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance. Welcome to the October 1st, 2025 session of the Dam Busters webinar series. The Dam Busters program is a collaboration between us at Mass Rivers, the Charles River Watershed Association, and the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration. This webinar series offers basic information about dam removal. It's not intended to advocate for the removal of any particular dam or dams. For the 201 series topics and exact schedule, please visit the Mass Rivers Alliance website at www.massriversalliance.org. Also, I want to highlight this month on the Mass Rivers website homepage, you'll find a post about our latest and very exciting international event at Dam Busters, the video that was done on September 19th by the folks at Dam Removal Europe, who interviewed Beth Lambert of the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration and Chad Sumner of Sumco Eco Contracting about the removal of the Bel Air Dam in Pittsfield. We're really excited to be working with Dam Removal Europe on spreading the word about the wonders of small dam removal internationally. Today's webinar is about how to work with conservation commissions. Please mark your calendars for the next session on November 5th at noon, which will be another deep dive into community engagement, following up on our day-long in-person workshop on that topic that happened last week. A few housekeeping items. First of all, this session is scheduled to end at 1 p.m. Please put your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, which Mass Rivers staff is tracking, or hold them until the last half hour's question and answer session. Number 3, please put your name and affiliation in the chat, and note that these webinars are being recorded. Recordings and any other webinar materials will be made available on the Mass Rivers website. I'd like to give a special shout out to those of you who have been completing the post-session surveys. And an even more special shout out, if that's possible, to the few who have sent us information about their experiences with dam removal permitting. Right now, the series is free to everybody, and we want to keep it that way. The surveys and all the information you provide make a huge difference in our ability to do that. We plan to announce some exciting expansions of the Dam Busters program that really have been made possible by your survey responses. So please stay tuned for that, and we'll send out the survey link during today's session and afterwards as well. And now I'm really delighted to introduce our speaker today, Paula Tarasi. Paula is the Town of Pepperell's Conservation Administrator, Grant Writer, and DPW Environmental Project Facilitator. Representing both the Conservation Commission and DPW, she has been committed to all phases of projects that are focused on restoring ecological functions and building climate resiliency within our rivers and streams. Together with many local and state partners, she was involved recently in a dam removal and 2 undersized culvert replacements. Paula is currently working with several partners on 2 additional culvert replacements and a dam removal. For over 30 years, Paula has been the vice president of Neshoba Conservation Trust, which is Pepperell's land trust. She's also a member of the wonderful Nashua Wild and Scenic Stewardship Council. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you so much, Monica. And thank you, Anna. And thank you also to the Mass Rivers Alliance and the partners, DER and the Charles River Watershed, for inviting me here today. It's really exciting to be here because I am on the conservation administrator, but I also, I see things both ways because working for the DPW, I look at like our infrastructure and what like these, if a dam were to blow out, what it might do to our infrastructure. So, and there's just so much you learn when you wear both hats. Some people say, how do you work with a DPW? But it's a good partnership actually to have. So they respect what I do and I respect what they do when we do communicate. So I think that's important. So thank you all for inviting me today. So as an overview, I'm going to be talking about, giving you a history of like Pepperell's dam removal experience and also then going into ecological restoration projects, and then key tips for working with conservation commissions. So this is actually one of our dam removal sites. It was at the Keyes Parker Conservation Area. So they actually look beautiful afterwards. So I'm going to talk about Pebbles ecological resources. And of course, when we're talking about the Nissitissit River or the Sucker Brook, which are project areas that we're working in right now, these are cold water fishery resources. They're outstanding resource waters. They're part of the Squanasset area of critical environmental concern. They're also, it's part of the Nashua, Squanicook, and Nissitissit Rivers Wild and Scenic Rivers. They're, all the rivers and their tributaries, and it's home to native eastern brook trout and rare mussel and turtle species. But each of you working with, if you're a consultant, you work with different towns, and these ecological resources, just look around, see what you have as well. It's a lot of these towns have similar resources, and of course, we're not a coastal town, so I apologize that I don't have that experience, but I have spent a lot of time at the ocean, and I envy you sometimes, a lot of times. So, and so I'm going to go into talk about a little bit about the pre-removal and the public concerns. When the town of Pepperell first started thinking about doing a project, and we started hearing maybe we should be taking out this Millie Turner Dam, the Turner Dam, because there was concern because it was a significant hazard, and it's privately owned. So why would we really care? Let the private property owner take care of it. And he was trying, but we were concerned also because we knew what was downstream. It was a major roadway and also utilities. So, but people, what we started hearing from comments is like there were historic concerns, and if we take out the dam, the river will stop flowing. I can't tell you how many people thought that. I don't understand the concept, but there's something, and I've heard it from other communities. So I thought this is a time to go out and talk with people who have similar experiences, especially the historic. I really started thinking, growing up in Lexington where everything's historic and there's so much you can't do. What is it about these dams? How can I learn how, the historic preservation? What do you do, to protect these dams when are we removing a dam and it should remain? Usually, most often not. If it's a I will say if it's for flood control or the hydro dam, what I'm going to end up talking about is the ecological restoration order of conditions. Those don't apply to those types of projects. So I visited sites of other dam removals to learn more. And so I thought Division of Ecological Restorations was holding a workshop, and it was in Plymouth, Mass. And we all know Plymouth is a very historic place. They had a number of dams, and I thought, why not go there and learn more about it? And I thought, how can Plymouth be even considering removing dams because they are historic? This is what I didn't know. I didn't know so much back then. And in the meantime, you can see in this picture, there's been 5 dam removals, and they've worked in one fishway. But I realized these dams that were put in were put in by the early settlers. But years, for like 12,000 years before that, the Wampanoag tribe was using this river. And the dams prevented the fish, especially the herring, from making their way, to the waters that they need to reproduce and everything else. So, it was interesting. Plus, one of the dams they were looking at on this day of the site visit, they were saying the water was very stagnant, and one of the neighbors was complaining of the smell. I mean, that's not it's pretty typical behind a dam. You get a big impoundment, it's warmer. But I started learning about some of the ecological benefits of dam removal. And then, we started talking as a town, spoke with the Division of Ecological Restoration. That's me on the screen. Then we had, an engineer came out, and we had a preliminary study done. Now, Division of Ecological Restoration, you probably all know that today at 4 o'clock is a deadline for signing up for these studies for this year. But I can't tell you how valuable these studies are. I mean, right from the beginning, when you have the study done, you can actually talk about the project. You learn so much. I mean, the wetland resource assessments. What are you looking at now? What do you expect will happen with the wetland resources after the dam is removed? You learn about sediment testing analyses. Um, I mean, you learn all these things that are on here. You learn, like, you're looking at the site and you're like, well, is this historic? Is this? Is it that? But you also learn, what are the potential permitting requirements? There's a lot of permit requirements, but they need to be addressed. And this study, when you have a study done like this, so much of this information is so helpful because then you end up with a preliminary design plan and a cost estimate for what it would either cost to take the dam out or the different stages beyond the preliminary design phase. And also too, like it provides like recommended next steps. These projects can take years. Permitting can take 9 months, 18 months. Um, so it isn't an overnight process, but having this information also when people ask, they might ask you about the project. This document that's prepared will provide all kinds of information. And it's so helpful to be able to talk with people. And that's why when we have these types of projects, what we did was we did public outreach. There's nothing better than a site visit. And site visits with partners. Um, we also we had people like, we had mussels, a rare mussel species. So Jason Carmignani was there from the state. Sometimes, we had other public officials. We had people from Division of Ecological Restoration who could talk about the dam removals. And people came from all over. We invited like the community. There's a whole group of people you can't see there. But we also made sure that the public outreach was done at like the chapters of the local chapter of Trout Unlimited, which is the Squanichosett chapter of Trout Unlimited, who was really instrumental in making a lot of the projects that have happened take place. And we go to community centers. We put stuff on the town website. We have a website for the Ecological Suckerbrook Restoration Project, and it just helps kind of gives a timeline of the work that we're doing on the on these projects. But dam removal is such a big part of it. And these are two of the projects that we worked on. The Keyes Parker dam removal, that's on conservation land. And it seemed like a small dam, but nothing's moving. Nothing's moving upstream and downstream. I'll go into it in more detail. And there was the Turner Dam removal in 2015. And I know there's people on the call that were involved in that. So a lot of people getting on the call that I have worked with. So it's nice to see everybody. And the Turner Dam, it was a high hazard dam. It was privately owned. It was historic. The mill building was demolished. It was the only barrier on the Nissitissit River, which is a cold water fishery visited by many fishermen. Um, it has state-listed mussels, which had to be addressed. The recon study was done in 2011, that study that I spoke about, the Division of Ecological Restoration offers, with a deadline today at 4 o'clock for this year. In 2015, it was removed and it reconnected 40 miles upstream to 57 miles downstream. And if you look at this is the Turner Dam before, and it looks unassuming. It's a high hazard dam. What could happen? But if you were there in the winter or spring, the water going over this dam, you couldn't stand next to it and have a conversation. It roared. It was so loud. It just looks so peaceful. And I think when the process hit during construction, and when all was said and done, we were assured, townspeople were assured, that there was all kinds of concrete put in behind it. And of course, with concrete, you'd have rebar. I remember when it was taken out, seeing 4 pieces of rebar, and the cap on the top was just a thin cement cap. I mean, this thing, if the sediment hadn't been there, I don't know what else was holding it back. But the dangers of this are kind of very scary, the public safety. So, taking out dams not only removes, the public safety hazard to the roadway, our roadway infrastructure, our utilities downstream, but the ecological benefits are it's just amazing. It's just, you can't make up for, what happens with these projects. And this is immediately kind of like after the project. You can see they kept the abutments. You can see the right abutment there. Um, that area that you see to the other side of like this area over the other side of the Nissitissit River, that's all restored now, which I'll show you in the next picture. And it's even more. First, it comes, I always say to people with these dam removals, when you look at the pictures, first, it's mud because it was an impoundment. And then without doing anything, you start to see it looks like fuzz. And that's what I called it. I said, look at how fuzzy it is. And then time, the vegetation grows up, and now it's full of trees. The trees are coming in now, and they have been. So, it's good to have those trees next to the stream because then they help to shade it. So when we did the Turner Dam, there were a lot of people that were involved, a lot of partners. Um, Division of Ecological Restoration, of course, for the recon study, and this is just like the kind of like the study efforts that happen because monitoring is so important, and understanding exactly what's going on with the stream is also important. There were data loggers, which from Trout Unlimited, the Squattishit chapter, leadership, volunteer efforts, and funding. Excuse me. Also, the Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, they've been doing fish surveys. So we knew what the health of the fish were before and after. With natural heritage and endangered species, we studied and translocated the rare mussels. And Keene State College also did pre and post removal sediment transport studies. And UMass Amherst, excuse me, did a pre and post removal water quality study for temperature and dissolved oxygen. So there were these partners, as well as our local watershed association, and many groups involved in helping with this project. I mean, when you need volunteers, you reach out, and so many people come forward to help out. It's incredible the type of support you get, and you learn so much more about your waterway. I mean, if I'd known the number of rare mussels that were in there, understanding the fish populations, understanding the data loggers and the temperature. I mean, before we took these dams out, the water in these impoundment areas were like 85 degrees. And here's an example on the Turner Dam. We have on the left-hand side, they're looking for mussels. They got the 5-gallon buckets with the plexiglass tops on them. And they're locating the rare mussels so that they can be moved. In the bottom left, you can see them. They've got the tags on them, little red tags. They will be moved to take them out of harm's way so that when the sediment is released, they aren't suffocated. That's the last thing we want to do with the rare mussels. In the middle picture, you can see they're doing fish surveys, and then you can see a native, like a brook trout in the bottom picture. They're keeping track of what kind of fish are in the stream before and after, and kind of looking at the health. And on the right-hand side, you see the data loggers. You see some of the monitoring that's taking place in the upper picture, and in the bottom, even things like, the rare turtles. Everything that's in there is considered, whether it's natural heritage, or it's the fish, or if it's the mussels, if it's the clean water. I mean, a lot of our waterways are used also to recharge our municipal wellheads, and that's true with some of the streams in Pepperell. So clean water is very important, and removing these dams we're finding is making a big difference. Then we had the Keyes Parker Dam. That's the first picture I'd shown you. So that's a non-jurisdictional dam within the town-owned Keyes Parker Conservation Area. It's also a cold water fishery, so they've been doing the fish studies on there as well, Mass Fish and Wildlife. So, there's this goes to show you, we had an Oak Hill Street, we had a culvert that's been replaced. The access road culvert's been replaced. This beaver dam's been removed. Making these connections just makes it so much healthier. And Sucker Brook is the brook that all this work is taking place on. And it's a tributary to the Nissitissit River, which is, of course, which flows to the Nashua River, to the Merrimack River, so it just, we're all doing our part by doing these types of projects, I feel. And the work that we've seen, we've just found that we haven't seen any downsides to these projects. It's just Initially, seeing a machine that close to the river or in the stream was a little difficult because I work for the Conservation Commission and what our jobs are. But these projects, I'll get into it a little more, why it's important. But that's the dam before. We had an eel here, right at the base of the stream, good sized eel, right at the base of the Sucker Brook here. Nothing's going over that dam. And that impoundment, once again, 85 degrees in the middle of summer, pretty much filled in with sediment, very mucky. And it's just important to keep in mind, what's the quality of the water that's being impounded by the dam? This was the Kais Parker Dam immediately after the removal, and this is what a lot of people think happens. This is all you'll see. In a couple of places on the edge where the stream is starting to form, this is like immediately after in October 2021. You can see there's actually stumps. Those are the stumps that were under the water, left over from when the stream originally flowed. When you look at the stream and where it flowed, you walk along the edge, you trip over these little stumps, these small pieces of stump that were still there from 100 years plus ago. It's kind of cool. It knows it's the channel it wanted to follow. And this was 6 months later. We did no planting. There was no planting done. This was all what was in the seabed. And it was just like so pretty, and especially when the wind's blowing and you see that look, it's just so nice, and the stream's so clean looking and free flowing, and the fish are moving up through the stream, which is it just every time we take a barrier out, the ecological benefits to fish, to wildlife. I mean, sometimes I say to people, sometimes it's the things you can't see in the stream. People aren't looking at the macroinvertebrates and stuff like that, but it's, it makes a difference. And when we're doing the Sucker Brook project, it's called the Sucker Brook Restoration Project. These are some of the people we were working with. I mean, the funding, the support, I mean, our partners. I mean, moving these projects forward takes a lot of work, a lot of dedication, but there's a lot of groups that are there to support you. And our engineering teams for the Sucker Brook Restoration Partners, Horsley Witten Group, Gomez and Sullivan, but in the funding and just the local partners, it's incredible how many people come out to help with these projects. And so I want to go into ecological restoration projects, as that's kind of why I'm here today, because dam removals do fall under ecological restoration projects, or they can. In 1972, those of us who work for the Conservation Commission or conservation commissioners, we know, the Wetlands Protection Act, it authorized each city and town to establish a locally appointed municipal agency of the Conservation Commission. And, until that point, we were dealing mostly with like subdivisions, roadways, large infrastructure and permitting that. But in 2014, there was an amendment made to the wetlands regulations and established the criteria for ecological restoration projects and which needs to be, how to be eligible to receive a restoration order of conditions. And that's under 310 CMR 10.11 to 10.14. Not a big read, but an important, because it goes over everything. It really does. And it's like, it's very, there's a lot to it, but there's regulations in place to protect the interests of the act. So, and the projects whose primary, ecological restoration projects are projects whose primary purpose is to restore or otherwise improve the natural capacity or resource area, to protect and maintain the interests identified in Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, when interests have been degraded or destroyed by anthropogenic influences. And these are the interests of the Act. And there's 6 projects that can fall under ecological restoration projects. And one of them is dam removal. And a lot of these things, it meets the interests, like dam removal, but all of this information is so critical to like each dam removal project, and everything's evaluated, everything's looked at. I can't tell you how many ways. In fact, like ecological restoration projects that are permitted by a restoration order of conditions may result in temporary or permanent loss of resource areas. or the conversion of one resource area to another. And this is a perfect example. This is the Turner Dam. That area on the left is the impoundment. The area on the right shows when the impoundment is gone. And I showed you the pictures from that. So the conversion is something that it can happen with a ecological restoration project. So then working with conservation commissions, like understanding their concerns, providing examples and resources, focus on the wetlands regulations and make it easy for them. I don't know how many of you are consultants, but it's a lot to think about. But when you come through, when you're doing a project, an ecological restoration project, and you issue an ecological restoration order of conditions, you have gone through quite the process to get there. But remember, as conservation commissions, we're used to projects where we, subdivisions and things like that. But restoration projects are it's part of our regulations, and it's an important part of our regulations. And to get there, you have to go through a host of permits, which I'll get into as well. But when the commission has questions, like understand their concerns, because you're going to have time. Conduct public outreach early, offer informational presentations to either the Conservation Commission or other boards and towns, meet on site. I can't say that enough. And understand, a lot of conservation commissions haven't worked on ecological projects. So, emphasize that restoration projects are not development projects, but they're projects that are designed to maximize ecological benefits. And there's so many ecological benefits when you get through the process, and there's so much oversight. There's so many different organizations you'll be dealing with. And then, you can provide examples because there's plenty. Division of Ecological Restoration, a lot of groups have information about this, but show before and after pictures of dam removal, just like I just did. Connect them with other conservation agents who have been through dam removals with emergency restoration projects. Come see me anytime. Call me. You got my contact information. It's always it's encouraging when people reach out, because I reached out because I didn't have the answers and I wanted to understand what other communities were doing. And I want to be assured that, I needed to learn more about it. And then identify nearby completed or ongoing dam removal projects and encourage them to visit. And then, there's some, I have the last slide is the dam removal resources. And then emphasize that project partners have been doing this restoration work at dozens of sites across the state for many years with great success. So this isn't brand new. This is since 2014. And my first experience, of course, was with the Turner Dam, not knowing about the about the historic. But I also, when I heard in 2014 that there was an ecological restoration order of conditions in that process, MACC had a great conference, and it really helped me to understand. This is following regulations. These are regulations that have been provided with the guidance, the criteria, the eligibility. Everything's provided, and it's very specific, but it's very thorough. It's a very thorough permitting process. And when you have to focus on the regulations, educate them about ecological restoration projects and restoration orders of conditions. Restoration's order of conditions include, general conditions and special conditions for dam removal projects. And the restoration order of condition includes general conditions for just about every one of the types of projects that they have. There's 6 projects like stream continuity or daylighting streams and things like that. But there are special conditions for dam removal projects and several of the other types of projects. But and I've heard people say that they want additional conditions, but what I was told and it's in the regulations, the Conservation Commission can only issue additional conditions under their bylaw or ordinance. If there's something that relates to their bylaw or ordinance. So some people may bring that up in the chat or later on. But I think it's something, it's been thought through. Things like invasive control, monitoring, all these things are part of when the project, you're not done when the dam's removed. There's still work to be done. And the monitoring and everything else is so important. Um, okay. And then and refocus them on their jurisdiction if necessary. Like the wetland resource areas, that's really what the commission it should be focused on, not the historics or the aesthetics. But you'll be surprised, like you will learn so much from the reports when you're doing these projects and they include, if it's a historic area, and a lot of these dams are considered historic, there is a lot, you receive a lot of really great information to help you understand the whole project site for when why it's considered historic. You learn about so much about the site, and then make it easy. So I always say reassure them that other agencies conducted extensive reviews and addressed major issues. The water quality, the sediment, invasives, and monitoring. I mean, we, you know, invasive removal, we all know everything's under attack right now. We're just like, it seems like invasives, everyone has them. And but it's things that are going to be monitored after the fact. And like the sediment from the beginning to the end. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into, making sure is the sediment clean? Is it partial? Does it have some contaminants? Are they minimal? There's a lot of work that goes into determining that. And when they, I know DEP will ask for a sediment, you have to approve a sediment testing plan. Excuse me. Um, and the other groups, so DEP is involved, the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, the Division of Marine Fisheries, Natural Heritage and Endangered Species, DCR and the Office of Dam Safety, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Some of the information in the ecological restoration process has to be done up front, an email. Hey, do we have a time of year restriction because of the fish? Can we not do this time of year? There's that type of information, and other things take a more involved review, and natural heritage may be out on the site with you. I mean, it's a great learning process. As someone who, as a conservation administrator, being out in the river, helping to collect the mussels and work with them to, identify the mussels, and knowing we didn't just let the sediment go. We knew everything we needed to know about that river and the streams before we did the work. And the teams of people that worked with us were extremely knowledgeable and informative. And it's just like, it was a great opportunity. And then spell out exactly how the project meets the ecological restoration project criteria and the wetland protection performance standards. So if you're a consultant, we're always looking at performance standards. But we also, there are some things, the performance standards for fish runs, banks, bordering vegetated wetlands, land under water, et cetera. There are, the performance standards, but also how does it meet the ecological restoration project criteria? So that's, it's all important. But like I said, the process is really, that's why it takes 9 months to maybe 18 months to do some of these, to just do the permitting. But every step of it is a learning process. I'll tell you that every step of it is. But you learn, like I said, you learn so much about the body of water you're working with, and a lot of people will have a lot of questions before and after. So even after it's over, it's not over. Let them come out. Let them work with you on the invasives or to do the monitoring. Explain to them what you were doing. In Pepperell, we now have, I can go to the next thing. I'll go to that in a minute, but so here's an example. There's a summary. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. And, a picture like this shows the area restored. The mud area was like, just over the winter, and within a few months, it was completely regrown with a native seed bed. And we were very happy that there weren't any invasives in there, and we continue to monitor it. But like I said, site visits are invaluable. Go out, come visit, call people, check with people. I know other people who have had dam removal projects, and it's the best way to do it is to be on site, to be able to ask questions. And the wetlands regulations have paved a pathway for these restoration projects because they are important. There's a different process kind of that's followed, but they're under the Wetlands Protection Act. There are regulations for ecological restoration projects, and dam removals is definitely one of them, and and it's definitely worthwhile. And then also trust in the state and federal permitting process because it is very thorough. And we all want to do the best for our wetland resource areas. We really do. So that's why the process is so thorough. And here's a list of some people that, of course, I was going to bring up the Mass Rivers Dam Busters program. One of the things I want to say is I can't thank you enough because of the people you have brought in, whether it's engaging communities or sediment testing or permitting. If you have questions about any of those things, most of those subjects have been covered in a Dam Busters program. And when you look at those things, like what kind of permitting is required, inland, coastal, um, and what the permit is for. Like, I mean, does this require a 401 water quality certification? Of course, most of these projects typically do. But just to learn more about it on your own time, it's really interesting to watch Neil from Horsley Witten Group explain the permitting process. I was going to call him. But Neil and Alex Hackman and all these people that have done these Mass Rivers Dam Buster programs, really, really important information. And Division of Ecological Restorations and your watershed organizations who are DER partners, and the National River Watershed Association, and has been super helpful with us, and fisheries organizations and agencies like Trout Unlimited and the Mass Department of Fish and Game. Just they're always there, and it's interesting when they're doing these projects and they're out there helping you. You just everyone has Trout Unlimited might be thinking about the fish, but they're also thinking about water quality. And with all these droughts, I can't stress enough how important water quality is in these streams. And with continuing climate impacts, protecting these rivers and streams, these projects really take a deep dive into protecting them. They really do. So I don't know if that was enough
That was
time, but
fantastic, Paula. Thank you so much. We actually do have a couple of questions in the Q&A already, and also you can at this point put them in the chat, folks. But before we get started, I was hoping, Paula, for most of the people on the call know about how the Conservation Commission application process works, but if you could just sketch that out really quickly. I mean, it can be complicated, but just the basic steps. And also some of the acronyms used like NOI and OOC, if you could just spell those out for us so those who listen on recording will understand everything we're talking about.
yes, yes. So typically I don't have one right in front of me, with a notice of intent for an ecological restoration project, a lot of the work you do up front, like you're doing outreach, it's called like actions taken. It's actually an actions taken. Let me see if I have that. It's actually the 310 CMR 10.11, but these various actions that you take, it's like you start outreach early, and whether it's Mass Historic or Division of Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, a Mass Division of what is it called? For the I'm trying to think of the name. Whether it's the ocean or the inland groups, you definitely you do outreach to them. You have to know like ahead of time. You just want to understand what really needs to be done. And like these actions, and they're specifically called out. They clearly spell it out. And I had a list in one of my documents. I don't know if I still have it. So you do this notice of intent, and the notice of intent, by the time it comes to the commission, like all of the work's been done though. your sediment testing, um, for the 401 water quality certification, the what are some of the other?
By the way, Susie helped us out. She
Did
says
she?
it's Mass Division of Marine Fisheries.
The marine
Um,
fisheries, exactly. Good, thank you.
but
I
most
don't
people are starting the process with a LOI, a letter of intent, right?
notice of intent. Yeah, most people
Yeah,
start.
notice of an NOI, sorry, notice of intent. Um,
You need a consultant. You definitely need a consultant. This is a very involved process, and it's good to have that kind of support. You definitely need it. It's just
and once you go through this incredibly complicated process, you eventually wind up with, because the Wetlands Protection Act is complicated, so that's why the process is complicated. And as you were saying, Paula, it's all that gatekeeping is so necessary to protecting the resources in the first place. So, and then eventually you will wind up with an OOC, which I think you had, which is an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission that you're working with to help you
yes,
go forward with your project. That's what they
exactly.
issue.
Yes. But the ecological restoration order of conditions, if you meet the criteria, if you take all the actions and then you look at what is required next, like all the permitting, then your next step is once you have that and you go before the commission, you will end up with, if it's an ecological, it'll be an ecological, if it's the notice of intent, Form 3A, then you'd have an ecological restoration order of conditions. And that is the form that I'd said, it's a little different because normally I find with commissions, we have the ability with a notice of intent to add all kinds of conditions. But when it's a dam removal and it's an ecological restoration project, the way it works is they provided all the general conditions in the ecological restoration order of conditions for whether it's a stream crossing, those are general conditions, stream crossings, dam removals, um, daylighting streams, or whatever, whichever category you're in. But then there's a special section that's added specifically for dam removals. So the special conditions are actually provided as part of they're included right in the regulations. If you meet the eligibility for a restoration order of conditions because done the actions have been taken, you've done all the work that you need to do, and you're eligible, then when you get it, like I said, that it's a little different because that order of conditions the ecological restoration order of conditions not only has the general conditions, but it also has the special ones for dam removals. They have a similar special conditions for like stream content, like for when you're doing like say stream daylighting and things like that as well. So, but if you have a local bylaw and you want to add special conditions or an ordinance, you are allowed to add those.
Yeah.
That's what
I
the
think,
regulations state, and that's what I learned from my MACC workshop years ago. So,
yeah,
another
Mass
resource.
Association of Conservation Commissions, like, so
Yes.
extraordinarily helpful on this topic. Like, can't thank them enough, really, for the extraordinary work that they do to help all the conservation commissions and all the people who have to work with conservation commissions around the state. So I'm going to go on to the questions. Rebecca is asking, we're facing challenges with a dam removal project because the existing pond will cease to exist once the dam is removed. The Conservation Commission argues that removing the dam would harm the habitat that has developed there over time. However, aside from its scenic value, the pond no longer serves a functional purpose, especially since the mills it once supported are long gone. How can we, this is a great question, how can we effectively address this kind of misunderstanding and communicate the ecological benefits of dam removal?
Just from my experience and talking with other people who've been through it, we, you know, groups like Natural Heritage and Endangered Species are also part of the permitting process in the review. And you will see the pond will go away. But what is that pond? What's the quality of the water in that pond? Is it full of invasive plants? Because we've got one here in town that has full of water chestnuts, which will grow in areas like that. So we look at it as like if the two dams that we took out, if they if natural heritage didn't think it was something appropriate, the habitat, like I said, it's warmer water, so the things that you would expect to be living there, it doesn't support the same it's not the same quality for the habitat for that wildlife. So you just have to look at what exactly do you have? It might look pretty, but if it's that warm, if it's a cold water fishery, that contributing to that, it's not going to, that 85 degrees or because usually they're usually shallower. So, a lot of times it's not supporting the habitat for the wildlife that needs the cooler temperatures in these waterways typically. And we find that very few things were living in the actual impoundment when we've looked at the work. I mean, when we've gone out there and and like I said, the wildlife, the turtles or whatever, things move along. But like I said, it just wasn't ideal habitat for anything to be living in that waterway. So I don't know what their situation is, but I could be happy to talk with them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, yeah, overall, 100%. It's about um, what habitat and wildlife should be there versus what is there now. And there is some existing research on that as well, which we at Dam Busters hope to have some presentations on next year. But certainly, you're welcome to Rebecca. You're welcome to reach out to us at Mass Rivers or obviously Paula to get some more resources on that if you'd like. I'm going to move on to David. Can you identify any permitting steps which could have been eliminated or streamlined without losing the value of the process?
Actually, there's quite a bit of work underway right now to possibly streamline some of the process. And I don't know how they'll get there, but I do know um, because all of the permits to the different agencies are important. Um, so I don't want to say it's a loaded question, but it's definitely something that it's being looked at. And I think the people that are working on it, I think we'll get there with some of the streamlining because if it takes this long or this much work to get these projects through, whether through the whole process, even the permitting process, I think they can come up with a solution. You know what I mean? There's got to be a better solution. But I think the people working on it right now are the ones that we can rely on will make it happen. I know Mass Audubon and DER and a lot of the different organizations, a lot of the different, even the consultants that are involved in it are working to find a good solution to this. But I think you'll still see that they'll make sure. It's just like when you change a regulation, you make sure it's a very thorough process.
Yeah.
I wish I could say, you know, you could do without this, or you could do without that. I know it's not my call, and I know everybody believes, and their work is everybody's work is important. So I wish I had a better answer for you.
Yeah, I know. I'm actually that would kind of be my answer too. But thanks, Paula, because there is a group of professionals working on that. Mass Audubon spearheading some of that work, and all the other partners that you mentioned. And that's also kind of why we at Dam Busters put together this permitting survey because we want to hear about the exact problems that people have encountered in these processes. So we appreciate that question and bringing that attention, that particular problem to light. Okay, next question is from Jill, who you may know. Do you have any suggestions about how dam removal practitioners could help proactively educate conservation commissions across the state before dam removal applications hit their dockets?
There's so much time before it actually hits their docket, before they file a notice of intent. That's probably the last thing that happens with these ecological restoration projects. But there's so and each community has an opportunity for plenty of like public outreach. Um, I always say, a lot of times the dam owners will be part of that conversation as well. But I just feel like, there's plenty of opportunity ahead of time to do site visits, to work with the public. Um, Remember, this dam owner is typically, has this liability and this responsibility, and they'd like it to work a little quicker too. But I just feel that, you know, you'll get there, definitely get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Um, Linda is actually, I'm going to go to follow up quickly with because David weighed back in and he's saying he's wondering about your exact experience and whether you hit any permitting problems that you can talk about quickly because he's doing that work with Audubon.
Okay. The thing is that when we did run into, I don't want to mention any specific groups, but what we found with one project to the other, sometimes the different regions, like say if it's DEP, different people, um, sometimes I don't want to say they have different answers, or if someone's been with an organization for a long time, like say if you were Mass DOT and there was a person you were working with on a project and that person left, sometimes you might get different answers to the same question, and depending on which district you're in or where you're working. So that can make it a little bit confusing, very confusing. Like if it's a Chapter 91, if you need a license or a permit, and I mean, there's a lot of different agency or organizations you work with, and like I said, if you're working with the same person for each project, you still sometimes or different parts of the Massachusetts have different responses to some of the questions.
Got it. Okay, let's now go to Linda's question. Can you elaborate on the requirements from NHESP for the endangered turtles? Did you need to do baseline and post removal monitoring? Was there a time of year restriction? How was the review process with them?
With natural heritage and endangered species, um, especially with the turtles. These were aquatic turtles, so it wasn't like box turtles or something like that. So they would be in the stream. So even before any work was done, there was like, there was someone on site. There was someone on site to monitor. So making sure when erosion control went up, it was turtle fencing put in. So there were those types of requirements. Turtle fencing was put in to kind of keep them out of the work area. And then the day of the dam removal, there were people there to make sure the turtles, there's somebody monitoring the site, someone, sweeps done prior to the actual machines getting brought into the area. As they came in, the machines came in, someone was in front of them. Once they were let into the fenced area, then that area had already been swept. And for both of these projects, we had teams of people watching the project. So, you know, there was one turtle that wasn't rare that just kept seemed to showing up, but the natural heritage does put in place like a turtle protection plan. It's very, very specific, and it's for good reasons. And it does involve monitoring, turtle fencing, the whole thing. You know, someone's on site the whole time that anyone's doing any kind of work.
Great, thank you. Okay, and Linda says thank you. Last question, possibly second to last, because I have a little question for you, but we'll see how time goes. Paul is asking, assume we want to reestablish the stream channel, matching the upstream and downstream channel, adding a deeper channel for adequate fish passage. Should the channel have a larger rock on the outside of bends and bio engineering approach the inside of bends? I'm a little trouble reading it. However, these new channels need to be able to convey larger storms like a 100-year flood and potential erosion and scour in the reconstructed channel. Um, this may be an engineering question and not so much a question for you. Are steeper sections spaced with pools a good approach? Are considerations for canoeing and kayaks taken into consideration? Um, what are the major differences in the general conditions between the usual projects and restoration projects? I think maybe that last question is the one to focus on. What are the major differences in conditions between general conditions and the more specific ones?
You mean, I'm wondering if he's thinking like if you're doing a project, like say we're doing a single family house or a subdivision, there's all kinds of things. You don't want work pretty much if you can help it within the resource areas. Otherwise you'd be dealing with replication areas and stuff. Do you think that's what he means? I mean, the thing is, restoration projects, you're, for dam removal, you're in the stream, you're removing the dam. And like I said, I think going back to the first question, that's one of the other things. Taking the dam out, fish moves through, water moves through quick, more easily. Sediment passes and continues to pass through. So, but when that's the difference between the ecological restoration project and your typical order of conditions, because typical orders of condition, like I said, you're not you're not replacing one resource area with another. Um, there's a number of things that are it's
Yeah.
just like it's like when that's what we did for many many years until 2014, and then 2014 then we were able to do these ecological restoration projects, but they're very specific what the eligibility is, and dam removal is one of them. If but there's certain criteria you have to meet. I don't know if that helps. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it was. I agree. It's a little tough to exactly know how to answer that one, but actually, just having spoken about the turtles, like there's a very specific difference between what general conditions might normally have and what the
Yeah,
specialized conditions would have for a restoration project with habitat considerations, etc. So there is a whole like list, I think you're saying, Paula, of things that would go into these special conditions depending on
exactly.
the project
Yes.
and the situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Each one of
was
the
just going to close
agencies.
quickly. We're almost on time, ending here. But if you have any quick tips for folks if they have to do a hearing in front of a conservation commission, because that can be a little daunting for people. And sort of if you've done hearings, what did you find helpful?
The thing is, I been at the hearings for the two projects in Pepperell, and I've actually gone to several others, and presenting the information and just explaining kind of what I had explained today. The ecological restoration projects, especially these dam, if it's a dam removal, and just explaining the criteria that went into it, and they know about it ahead of time. They will have seen all of that information, all the reports, whether it's Mass Historic or um, the 401, DEP's comments, Natural Heritage's comments, and just trust the permitting, trust the process, because I think it is very thorough. And I think the benefits outweigh. I mean, like I said, you're not destroying it, you're restoring it. And just as what happened in, where is it? When I went to Plymouth, and so we're restoring it we've got the dams there now, but they're restoring it to the way it was. We have to remember that's the way it was when the Wampanoag tribe used that river for 12,000 years. So realize that restoration is so critical, but you got to trust process.
Thank you, Paula. Thanks for the excellent presentation today. We had a lot of applause for you in the chat. So people are immediately
Thank you.
appreciative. And
Thank you.
we'll see everybody for Dam Busters again on, I believe it's November 5th. A little more on community engagement, and look out for the evaluation survey, which I'll be sending out today. Thanks again to everybody. We really appreciate you attending. Bye bye.